drawings are the subject. These drawings are the subject of an exhibition at Chicago Gamespace that runs through this Sunday. It's closing this Sunday, August 22nd. Before we take a look at what some of these drawings look like, I was wondering, Jordan, if you might offer us some context. What first brought you to France? What's your history with that country, and what inspired you to pick up pen and paper and begin sketching?
Well, that's a big question. France has been kind of intertwined with my family's past history for 2 generations. I'm American. I was born in New York. My father and grandfather were European originally, from Vienna, Austria. And my dad passed through France as a refugee during World War II. So I guess I always heard about France growing up. And then in my 20s, I first had the chance to visit. And I did a game called The Last Express, which was set in France, or it started in France. It followed the 1914 Orient Express from Paris to Constantinople, right before the outbreak of World War I. And so the research I did for that project, and making friends with people in France, visiting Paris more often, just kind of started a connection with this country that's just been growing. So I came here 5 years ago for a project, which is still underway. They're working with a team here. The project hasn't been announced, but along the way, I started sketching in Moleskine notebooks, which I guess you have the artifacts to explain that more thoroughly. But it's I've always been a journal keeper since I was in college. I started writing down what happened every day, and that journal coincided with the making of my first games, Karateka and Prince of Persia. So I've actually released those journals as a kind of a making of, but it's really just my private reflections at the time that I never intended to be published. And these sketchbooks are kind of the same thing. I just sort of drew what was in front of me every day, at odd moments, cafes and airports. So there's a lot of street life, things like that. And so, I didn't mean to at the time, but here I've gone and published them as books.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about that background. I hadn't realized, especially the family history and connection. When I first came across your sketch journals, and we'll look at some slides here in a moment, but I just want to say that I was immediately drawn to them. And I think what was most appealing for me is that in an era of excessive media saturation and a social media lifestyle where there's shouting and contention, and art sometimes finds its way into the fray. What I most appreciated is here, was an artist, an art style and subject matter that was set apart. I've used the word anecdote to describe your work before. You grant the viewer, the visitor, access to your thought processes as an artist, and being set apart with a focus on a quiet pursuit of art and life from your Southern France point of view was exceptionally appealing and no less rigorous and engaging as other art forms. It's also a very extraordinary life, to be sure. It's wonderful to see.
Jonathan, I just lost audio. Let's see.
Hoping the audio is now working, Jordan.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
excellent.
I hear you again.
Was just talking about the stunning backdrop for your drawings. Um, and so if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your choice of subject matter and your your selections in terms of what you choose to represent in its pages.
You used the word antidote, which, I mean, it really started as that, because so much of what I do is, working with teams, sometimes under pressure. A lot of it is verbal and kind of involves a lot of sort of pre-planning and organization. And sometimes, the arc of a project can take, years. So part of what attracted me about sketching is, first of all, that it's really in the moment. It might be, 3 minutes to do a drawing. At most, it might be 20 or 30, but it's a self-contained experience when I'm just completely present with whatever I'm seeing. It's kind of a state of flow, and it calms me. It's kind of like a non-judgmental way to just really notice what's around me, connect with the world, and I think it just kind of uses a part of my brain that I don't always have a chance to use in the course of the day. It just feels like a good balance to. I don't want to say right brain activities, because I just read a great book about the like how the left and right sides of hemispheres of the brain really work, and it's way more complicated and interesting than the cliche of drawing on the right side of the brain and so forth. But I do think that drawing activates brain areas and processes that just do a lot of good things. So I enjoy it for that reason, and I just select. I take opportunities. I don't look for like the most fascinating, wonderful things to draw, because sometimes a sketch of an ordinary object, or just a street that's an ordinary street, can actually be a more enjoyable, and ultimately can even be a better drawing than something spectacular. So I'm opportunistic. If I have an extra 15 minutes at a cafe because the person I'm meeting is late, or I'm at an airport or a train station and there's time to wait, then I'll sketch there. And of course, every now and then I'll travel, and part of the pleasure of traveling for me now, seeing new places, landmarks, new cities, is to bring my sketchbook and maybe have the chance to sketch there.
That tone is definitely felt by the viewer, and calls to mind in terms of your process the wonderful French word of the flaneur, just kind of drinking life, taking it by moment by moment, and capturing what's of interest. And that might be a nice segue as we move on to talk a little bit about your process and your preferred medium of choice. You've already mentioned that you use moleskin notebooks, and I know you've mentioned you use black micron pen and brush markers. And historically, the medium of sketching served kind of a preparatory purpose. Artists would use pencil or graphite or crayon, that in many cases is erasable, but these would be studies for other works. But in your work, the sketching and the drawing is almost an end in itself. Can you elaborate a little bit about your choice of preferred media, as well as your approach technically to sketching?
Sure. I mean, I never set out to produce finished drawings. This was always more about the act of sketching, sort of as an end in itself. It's I think I saw a documentary once about Zen archery, where like after releasing the bow, like it doesn't even matter whether it hit the target or not. It's just about releasing the arrow. So for me, making the sketch, it's done. I turn the page and I go on. And originally I didn't intend to to publish these journals, it was actually a while before I even started showing them to anybody. So I use a pen because that way you're doing the drawing once. And for me, like doing a pencil sketch and then kind of planning how the drawing is going to be and then going over that with pen. For one thing, that's doing the drawing twice. And then it becomes more like a project, like I'm trying to achieve a certain result. And I really just like sort of the unmediated, just looking, drawing, and if the lines don't come in quite the right place, if it's a little out of proportion, so be it. I add a little bit of ink wash with a marker usually. It's a kind of a marker with a brush, and so what you just showed on the previous slide was actually unusual because that's in a live drawing workshop, and there I'd actually pulled out some watercolors. It's
see. Right, the majority of the work looks similar to what we're looking at now, mostly monochromatic, primarily line focus with occasional color, not necessarily coloration, but use of the ink brush marker to flesh out certain elements of the composition.
Yeah, and that's sort of a practical choice because it involves 3 pens, black and 2 shades of sepia, so I can carry that with me along with the notebook, and I don't need a special artist kit. It's just always in my messenger bag or backpack. But also, I really like the the feeling of monochrome. It's it makes the drawing doable in a short time frame. It doesn't take long at all to do a sketch like this. This one here in a cafe, 5 minutes later, those people would have gotten up and left. So I need to do the sketch pretty quickly. And having just a few colors, makes it more manageable. Sometimes I add a highlight of a different color because I have that pen handy. I'm always sort of experimenting with different techniques.
You seem to have gotten quite proficient with the expeditious sketching process. I remember one of the sketch journals, there's a scene where I think you had limited access to the interior of La Sagrada Familia, and you contextualized the sketch by saying that you had to perform the sketch inside of 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I remember that. I felt a little embarrassed to be doing a quick rough sketch of something so magnificent that really I should set up an easel and just spend the whole day doing it. But it was just a quick trip through. This is a live drawing workshop sketch. I guess this might have been 15, 20-minute pose. Used a second color there.
So in going to life drawing events and going to museums, sketching paintings and sculptures or architecture from art and architectural history, there seems to be this kind of interest in honing your dialogue and connection with art history as while you're simultaneously developing your own artistic practice. And I was wondering if in recent years, if as to some of your influences and inspirations from art history or from other facets of life, what's kind of shaping the look and feel of your work.
Wow. Well, I get endless inspiration from other artists. Going to museums, of course, the Impressionists especially have always spoken to me. I'm interested in kind of minimalistic art, like what you can do with fewer lines, fewer techniques, how much you can evoke without actually drawing it in detail. Comic book art and graphic novels is, I love bande dessinée. and in France, there's such a great tradition, of comics art that's kind of followed a different path than it did in the U.S. I mean, both traditions, have amazing artists, but here, I discovered artists like Sampé, who drew, he just draws wonderful scenes. Again, very, very simple. Johann Sfar has a really interesting style. It was actually seeing Sfar's notebooks years ago at an exhibition in a museum in Paris that kind of was one of the things that gave me the idea of starting to carry a notebook and sketch. And the other thing at the same time was I had written the script for a graphic novel called Templar, which was published in the US by Macmillan. And the artists, husband and wife team, Lewin Pham and Alex Pouvilon, just seeing them bring this world to life was so inspiring to me. I was so impressed by what they were doing. And at the same time, I was starting to sketch myself. And on one of my visits, we were going over the storyboards for the book. Alex went to a cabinet and said, "Here, I've got these moleskin notebooks that I bought a few years back, but I don't use them because I'm drawing all day. I don't have time." And he gave me one of them. And Alex's sketchbooks, and he showed me his moleskins, and they were just phenomenal. So I was intimidated, but also inspired. So I started sketching in that moleskin that Alex gave me, and then never stopped. Hard to believe that was more than 10 years ago. It's and kind of I never stopped being amazed how something that you do every day, how it just sort of gradually built. Like at the time, I didn't think, I just felt so limited in my sketching, and then every few years I look back and I feel like, okay, there actually has been progress. I can see it on that time frame. So sometimes when people look at my notebook and they say nice things, they say, "Oh, I can't draw. I wish I could do this." I want to tell them, you can. I did. You can too. If you just pick up a pen and a piece of paper and start drawing now, you'll be amazed what you'll be doing in 10 years.
It sounds like I need to look up a few of those artists that I might not be familiar with. I've also, my first impression when viewing your work was a connection as well with the Caldecott winning illustrator, Peter Spear, and his representations, similarity in terms of line and use of the wash, which was such an appealing art style for me, and great to see more of it in different forms in your work. Now that people on the call have had an opportunity to see several of your drawings, this might be a good time to take a look at the exhibition and show how some of the work has been arranged and laid out and grouped together for those who are unable to view it in person before it closes this Sunday. This was the exhibition opening on Friday, June 4th, 2021. We raised a toast in your absence, Jordan, of course, knowing that it was impossible for you to be here, circumstances being what they are. But it was a wonderful night. And I have a slide showing here is what visitors will first experience when they arrive at Chicago Gamespace. There's a title wall with an introduction to you and your work. And the exhibition begins by foregrounding your work in other media. So here are some of the notable games that you've authored, and beginning with the first, 1984's Karateka, and another playable in the exhibition is Prince of Persia. So far, one guest has completed Prince of Persia here at Gamespace, but Karateka
actually stood there for a full 40 minutes and played the game from start to finish.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and I've beaten it several times myself, although not in the space, not using we thought that presenting it, the version of it on the Nintendo, there's so much immediate audience recognition with the Nintendo controller. We thought that was a good form to present it, but it is, I think, trickier on the Nintendo entertainment system than using PC controls. So I think it was an especially great feat that was accomplished.
Yeah, I don't know if I could today.
But then we move on. There's another installation devoted to Last Express. We have some of the box art as well as a trailer that had been produced for the game and some didactic wall text. There's also some of your film work is screened, clips of Chavez Ravine and trailers for Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, both the film and as well the video game that you collaborated closely on. And finally, in terms of the non-drawing media, we also have some of your excellent books on display for people to browse through. The sketch journals, as well as some of the making of books in Templar and Salmak. But that brings us—
Great to see all this. I wish I could have been there.
Absolutely. That brings us to the exhibition of the drawings from the journals. And these are grouped into 5 different sections. We begin with your interest in studying and learning from life drawing and art history, and we have some drawings excerpted from the sketch journals. In this case, there's 2 drawings. One that shows there's comment about your visit to the Guggenheim and after seeing the David Hockney exhibition, which led you to, to sketch, I believe it's your nephew on the lower right-hand side, which is—
Right, that was for the Bilbao, for a gaming event there. The Fun and Serious Games Festival a few years ago.
Oh, wonderful. I of course, am an equal parts lover and admirer of games and the fine arts, and I love it whenever there's a cross-pollination. And many times games today are informed by art or media history, and vice versa. We're starting to see in fine arts more and more examples of video game artists making work for the fine art sphere. So love to see all this cross-pollination. But also there's a self-awareness. The drawings on the left-hand side are the left-hand side up here. It's you in New York, and you're speaking with a friend about kind of you're not sure where this journal project is going, but you were inspired by it and moving with it, and I appreciated that dialogue, that component of self-awareness as part of the project.
I love comics, so sometimes I just draw a comic of an exchange that just happened, but where, yeah, then the art is secondary to the dialogue, but I just want to record that moment.
Right, so here's some close-ups of some of your life drawing pose studies, as well as your observations of artwork and sculpture from museums and art history. The next section of the exhibition that we grouped together was kind of the galvanizing point was grouped around street life scenes. So these are either outdoor or cafe life observations that you've made. And that's a big enough presence in your work that we thought it would be a kind of one of the defining groups to exhibit together. And here we can see some close-ups of some of the outdoor street scenes, as well as some indoor cafe life. Next, we move on to the travel grouping of drawings. And I think many of us would agree we enjoy the opportunity to live vicariously through these. So many of us have been unable to travel, especially internationally, over the last few years, although hopefully that's changing. It's a little touch and go day to day, but anyway, it's wonderful to see some of your landmarks and in-transit scenes, as well as some depictions of tourists coming to and from places. And then the last two scenes are grouped around life and work, and as well games. So in this image from the life and work section, we see some members of your family, including a pet, Momo, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
That's my brother's dog, Sadie, in Brooklyn.
Excellent. So.
Oh no, sorry, the first one. Yes, that is a cat. I was looking at the other drawing.
And so in addition to representations of friends and family, which I think really underscores the fact that your work, your drawings are not, they're not called sketch books for a reason. These are specifically sketch journals, because they do have this kind of deeply personal component to them that is kind of an amalgamation of your professional and personal life, as well as your dialogue and discussion with art history and art practice. And so here's some key moments from the games section where you're attending the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, or speaking with Rami Ismail, who's an important video game thinker out there today. So all these things are kind of coming together. There's also a segment of the exhibition where audiences can view some of your processes and materials. So there's photographs of you making work, as well as the sketch, the Moleskine sketchbooks and pens and markers that you use. And finally, this is just taking a step back and taking the entire show in, but I was intrigued, Jordan, and wanted to make the observation that your career, until recently, has so largely been defined by new media and works on screens. And so there's almost a little bit of an irony in terms of like your shift to focus on physical media, and not to say that your work in other media is not continuing, but I was just wondering if you had any views or commentary on kind of the exterior physical world versus our increasingly growing interior virtual worlds. And I know you've commented on this in your journals before. I think there was, a moment where there was almost kind of frustration that more people were not out living their lives, interacting with one another, but just kind of omnipresently on phones. And yeah, just curious broadly as to your thoughts on both your personal artistic shift as well as kind of a greater societal shift.
It's interesting. I mean, for sure, sketching people out and about, on trains and cafes over the last 10 years, I've noticed fewer people, reading magazines and books, more people on their phones. But I guess my view of it now is it's kind of, it's not that simple. I think the product is on screens more often. Like, we watch movies and play games, on streaming, on our devices. But the process of creating those things is still multimedia and always has been. When I lived in LA and I was writing screenplays, a lot of my screenwriter friends, wrote on paper or on index cards, or spoke out loud and then had the recording transcribed. And I've always liked using sort of kindergarten techniques for whatever I'm doing, and game teams do as well. Just because a game is going to be playable on the next gen console doesn't mean that all of the tools used are digital. You still have whiteboards, you roll out big pieces of paper, you make games out of cardboard with little clay figurines and move them around. Things that are tactile, I think our brains connect with them in a different way. So I don't think any of that is going away. I mean, I like to read paper books. I like to look at drawings on paper. But here we're doing this, on a screen, and it's great, but we're talking about things that are paper. So it's, a lot of things are getting, especially with this last crazy year of, confinement and having to do things on screens that we previously, would have chosen to do, in physical space. But, as this, hopefully settles down and we're free again to, to get out there if we want to, are some of these changes going to be permanent or just temporary? It's interesting. But for myself, I really, I really treasure, in-person things in a different way that I don't think is ever going to go away.
I appreciate some of those observations, and I am so glad that you are incorporating the physical in your work. One can imagine a moment hundreds of years from now where we're looking back, and ironically it's often the physical media that survives, whereas digital media so ephemeral, and maybe we'll be a good archivists and preservationists, our future generations, but maybe not. And there's still a strong case for the physical, of course. So I think we are going to shift a little bit more towards a QA phase. So I invite people, if they'd like to pose questions into the chat. I think I saw a hand raised. And while I'm pulling up the chat window, Jordan, you alluded to the pandemic, and I thought maybe to get us started, I would pose a question to you, how the pandemic has affected your work. Obviously, the Year 3 journal just came out a little more than a month ago, and but if I'm not mistaken, most of that work dates to like a 2018 time period. So very much curious about.
Yeah, that was all. Yeah, that was all pre-pandemic. Year 4, which is now also passed, contained the beginning of the pandemic. So it kind of overlapped.
Oh, excellent. So there's, you heard it here, everyone. There's a Year 4 in the works, and very excited to see what that might entail in the future.
Well, Year 4 ended in, calendar year ended in July 2020. So the sketches are done. The book doesn't exist, but yeah, we're now in year, well, geez, Year 6. Starting Year 6, hard to believe.
Keep them coming. Great. Okay, so I've identified a few questions in the chat. One is do your subjects know that you are sketching them, and do you share the work with them afterwards?
Sometimes, like if they give me a look that's like, okay, I see you drawing me, then sometimes I'll show it to them just to kind of avoid any awkwardness. And I've never had a bad reaction from showing people the sketches. There's had one exchange which I sort of put down as a comic in one of the books. I forget which one. Maybe it was year one, where it wasn't the person I was drawing, but it was someone else in the cafe who kind of got upset that I was drawing someone. It kind of came over to me and said, "Hey, you can't do that. You need to ask permission." So sort of the three of us got into a conversation and ended up being okay. So I put that down as a comic, but yeah, I do get caught, definitely. It can also be an icebreaker, like if I want, just show someone the sketch you did of them. They're usually delighted. Except then if the sketch is not so good, then I'm a little embarrassed to show it.
You're embarrassed to show what? Sorry.
To show someone a sketch that isn't good or isn't flattering. If I know they're going to see it, then I feel like there's a little pressure to. Yeah.
Right. I remember some moments from some of your sketch journals where I believe it's your daughter, said, "Oh, that doesn't look like me, Dad," or something like that.
Oh yeah. The people in my family always have feedback on their sketches. Yeah, the first time that I sort of went public with my sketching habit was in 2008 on the set of the Prince of Persia movie. Until then, I'd been kind of sketching and not showing it to anybody. And my kids were little then, so that they weren't complaining yet. But on the set, like in between setups, I would sketch these amazing things that were happening around me, with camels and the horses and armies and trucks, setting up temporary cities in the desert. So naturally, people started looking to see what I was sketching, and that was kind of the debut. And since then, I'm pretty open about it. If you're with me, I'll gladly pull up my sketchbook out of my bag and show it to you, and you can see what I've been sketching lately.
There's a question about how your drawing style has changed over the years. I know you've drawn since you were a child, and even in some of your making of books, I recall there's some storyboarding or some character studies or sketches or whatnot. And so yeah, just curious if you could speak more to how that it's changed or evolved over time.
Sure. I mean, I drew all the time up until age 13 or 14 when I got my first Apple II and started programming. And so I'd say my drawing skill kind of stayed frozen where it was at age 12 for like the next 30 years. And then because I drew for the projects, but you can see in like the making of Prince of Persia journals, which the illustrated version includes a lot of my sketches and artifacts. You can see that it's not, they're not good drawings. It's just functional. I can scribble something that's useful. It's kind of part of my thought process, but they're not really drawings that are meant to be, to stand on their own as drawings, or to, they're more just like sort of production scribbles. So I'd say when I started up again, when I look at those sketches now, sketches from 15 years ago, I mean, I do see a lot of evolution. For one thing, like the proportions, like that's just something that like the more you do it, the more things kind of come into proportion. But like the drawings that I did at the start, like the heads were always too big, the hands were always too small. They're just like some mistakes that I just made, and most of us do, because usually when we start drawing, it's kind of a mix of drawing what we see and drawing what our brain thinks is there. So it's only in comparing what I've drawn to what was there that I see, gosh, why am I always making the legs like 40% shorter than they really are? And so it's like, it's sort of like unlearning a bad habit, like like a habit in a golf swing or a tennis serve. You kind of have to unlearn it and then sort of start doing it again a new way. And then over time it becomes second nature. So yeah, it's just like all sorts of little things that I've picked up. I mean, it's all self-taught. I didn't go to art school, but I do, in my day job, I work with a lot of artists, great artists who are very generous about looking at my sketchbook, thoughtfully, and then, giving me tips, which when I incorporate really make a difference. So I would say I've had great teachers over the years, but just not in a formal, educational setting. And I'm constantly learning. I mean, every time I go to a museum, every time I read a graphic novel, now I'm looking with different eyes because I'm kind of looking at how certain effects were achieved and thinking, wow, what if I tried this?
There's one or two questions that reference your games, and I know we're keeping the focus mostly to the drawings, of course, but kind of expounding on that, I was curious if you had any kind of hallmarks or similar techniques that you apply, irregardless of the media. Whether it's a drawing, whether it's a film, whether it's a graphic novel, whether it's a game. Are there kind of any consistent approaches that you take that you think can be identified across all of your media outputs?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for sure, every medium has different abilities and can do things that other media can't, and then can't do things that other media can. And the hallmark of games, of course, is that they're interactive. So all of the visual elements, the audio elements, the design, it is all sort of filtered through, what can the player do? You have a controller in your hands, or you have a touch screen. So what are the actions that you can take, and what does that do in the game? So you don't put amazing visuals in a game for their own sake. You put it in because it works as part of the structure. Movies are all about time, audio and video unfolding over time, controlled by the filmmakers, the editor. Graphic novels don't have that element of time because the viewer can set the pace, can turn the page quickly or slower, can look at the drawings or just read the words and kind of glance at the drawings. They can turn back and look more closely at something that was a few pages earlier. So there, the art is kind of guiding the reader's eye. It's all about like what can be read. And there's sort of the concept of the two-page spread. When you turn the page in a graphic novel, you've got two pages in front of you. So what do you see? Because your eye kind of sees what's on both pages before you start reading, but then you read left to right, top to bottom. So that's kind of the contract between a graphic novel reader and a writer artist. And then of course prose books are, it's all about it's words. So there the reader is setting the pace of how fast or slow they're going to read. And you're you can't always assume that every word is going to get read, but all you can do is put the words there in a certain order that affect the experience. So those are the differences, but what's common to all of those media is, I think, I always look for an economy of means. If you can do something with fewer moving parts, if you can say something with fewer words, or do the drawing with fewer lines, or get that feature of the game in with fewer meters and resources to manage and buttons on the controller, then that enhances the audience's experience because it's cleaner. And so you're always looking for things to do double, triple, quadruple duty. And like in screenwriting, you don't have a scene of dialogue just to establish a fact. You establish the fact in the course of also setting up the characters and the world and advancing the plot. And if it's a comedy, being funny, if it's a thriller, creating a certain momentum for the structure of the movie as a whole. So So always looking for that, efficiency. And when I find that, as a gamer or a reader, or a viewer, I really appreciate it. Like, wow, the impressionists, how they can suggest a forest and a particular time of day and lighting with just a couple of brushstrokes. It's like a miracle that I'm just fascinated by.
Absolutely. And of course, you've got that art historical tradition at your fingertips in France. And the last question, which I think we're coming up on a good stopping point here, is a little bit more of a personal one. And it's, have we lost you entirely to France? I mean, not lost, of course, you're always, connected to the US, but, curious if you are planning on staying or moving back to the US, passing along the question.
Well, this is a very particular time to ask about travel plans, because if this last year's taught us anything, it's that all plans are tentative. But no, at the moment, I'm deep in a project that's consuming me very deeply. So not moving anywhere in the next 6 months, that's for sure. I'm really enjoying Montpellier. It's, I didn't expect that I was going to be, that the place I was in a year and a half ago was going to be the place that I would like hardly ever leave, because before that I was traveling often, as the sketchbooks attest, to Paris and New York and LA, back and forth between France and the US. This year there hasn't been a lot of back and forth, but again, we'll see what next year brings. But I'm fortunate to be that, well, first of all, to be able to work in several media with great talents and great teams, but also really felt fortunate these last couple of years that all of the projects that I've been involved in are projects that we're able to continue. That productivity hasn't been diminished, by these these awful events. So I really feel blessed to be able to, to get up and go to work in the morning, as and to have been able to do that, all through this period. And sketching is one thing that's great, because, with pen and a piece of paper, you can do it.
Love it. Great. Well, I'm going to hand things over to Connery to wrap up, but just want to remind everyone if they would like to come visit the exhibition before it closes this Sunday. Chicago Gamespace is at 2418 West Bloomingdale. It's open 1 to 5 p.m. The sketch journals and some of Jordan's other publications, as well as some select prints, are available for visitors to collect and own, both by visiting Gamespace as well as visiting Jordan's website, jordanmechner.com. And there was one question, Connery, that was put in French, and I can't speak to that, but just to wrap up, there was a question also about whether the exhibition will travel, and I would say would love to be open to that idea if Jordan is, and look forward to having conversation with future venues if there might be interest in having another audience for the exhibition eventually, but nothing confirmed at the moment. So Connery, I'll hand things over to you, but it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jordan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much. It was great. I hope that everybody will have the opportunity to go check out Jordan's work at Chicago Gamespace. It will be there through this Sunday. Jonathan, can you answer? It says tickets in advance. They just give you a call at the.
Oh, right. Yeah. On the website, there is you can select tickets in advance from the website, but also will be available for walk-ins this Sunday. And tickets are just $5. Kids under 12 are free.
Great. French. They were just asking if Jordan could say something in French, maybe something that he likes the best about France.
Bon, oui, c'est avec plaisir. Il y a trop de choses pour résumer en 30 secondes, mais à ce moment, comme j'habite à Montpellier au sud, j'apprécie beaucoup le temps et la cuisine. Et ça, c'est que le début.
Okay, well, merci. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at the Alliance Française. Jonathan and Jordan, thank you again. This was fascinating work, and please go check it out. We thank you, and we hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Au revoir.